April 15, 1945, North Atlantic, 600 miles west of the Azores. Classified operational log, TF-22.8. The Atlantic looked like a hammered sheet of dull metal under a low ceiling of fog. The horizon swallowed into a gray emptiness that made the 10 destroyer escorts of Task Force 22.8 feel as though they were sailing inside a sealed room. For 2 weeks they had been moving in east-west sweeps, their hulls vibrating steadily at 12 knots, every man aware that this was no ordinary patrol. Naval intelligence believed several German Type 9C/40 U-boats, long-range subs known to operate in the mid-Atlantic, were heading west with a final mission. The rumor passing through the crews was darker than any previous U-boat threat. Berlin's collapse was imminent, Hitler's circle desperate, and some officers in Washington feared the Germans might attempt to hit the American mainland with a new form of V-weapon launched from a submarine. No one knew if it was superstition or science, but after the V1 and V2 had struck London without warning, no one dismissed it either. In the Combat Information Center of USS Stanton, DE-247, red lamps glowed against steel bulkheads as radar scopes pulsed and sonar plots filled with grease pencil marks. The smell of warm electronics, coffee long gone cold, and damp wool uniforms clung to the air. Sonar man third class Daniel Hale sat hunched over his headphones, filtering the ocean's endless static into patterns. At 21:10, he stopped breathing for a moment, hand rising instinctively. It was faint, so faint he thought it might be thermal crackle, but then it repeated, a distant, steady rhythm of screws cutting through water. "Con, sonar, new contact," he said low, steady, but tight with focus. "Bearing 080, diesel pattern, not surface traffic." Commander David Ramsey, Stanton CO, stepped closer. He carried the calm of a man who had lived inside steel hulls his entire adult life, yet his eyes sharpened. "Classification?" Hale tilted his head, listening deeper. "Too steady for biological, too clean for merchant. Range long, but it matches a Type 9 pattern, sir." Ramsey didn't hesitate. "Plot it. Helm, come right to 080. All ships, this is Stanton. Possible contact. Maintain radio silence. Prepare for attack pattern." Outside, the destroyer escorts pivoted in synchronized arcs, their wakes slicing quiet scars through the fog-covered water. Minutes later, radar aboard USS Frost, DE-144, reported a small surface contact moving west. Before the operator could refine the range, it vanished. A crash dive. The hunt began in earnest. The Stanton's first depth charge run came at 22:06. Metal clanked sharply as the racks released, and then the sea detonated in deep, rolling bursts. Shockwaves thudded back through the hull, rattling bulkheads and shaking dust from light fixtures. The crew held on to rails as the deck shivered. Hale listened through the thunder. When the ocean settled, his voice wavered with something like confusion. "We've got something, sir. Not a hull-size echo. Smaller, metallic, stationary." Ramsey frowned. "A decoy?" Hale shook his head, adjusting dials. "No, sir. Too solid. And too isolated. It's not moving." The escort circled the coordinates, probing the depths with active sonar pings that came back strangely muted. No debris rose, no oil slick spread, no U-boat surfaced. Yet the faint metallic echo remained, steady, suspended somewhere in the black water. Ramsey ordered a marker buoy deployed. The orange cylinder hit the surface with a soft splash, its blinking light swallowed quickly by the fog. They recorded the position as marker 7A. A chilly wind swept the deck as the task force widened its sweep pattern, the fog growing thicker, the swell heavier. Rain began around 2300, a cold, slanted curtain that reduced visibility to almost nothing. At 23:20, the radio crackled with a terse transmission from USS Frost. "Stanton, Frost, new contact, bearing 132, deep, Moving slow. Signature. Inconsistent with known German types. The CIC fell silent. Ramsey leaned over the speaker. Repeat. Inconsistent how? A pause. Then Frost replied. RPMs irregular. Mechanical pattern unlike Type 7 or Type 9. Cannot classify. Men exchanged uneasy looks. The Atlantic wind seemed to rise at that moment, moaning across Stanton's superstructure like a warning. Another contact, moving west, deeper, deliberate. Hale spoke quietly. Sir, the first object is still there. It hasn't moved an inch. But the storm was building fast. Waves slapped the hull with rising anger. The seas turned violent by midnight, making precision sonar almost impossible. The task force was forced to resume its broader sweep pattern, leaving marker 7A behind with the intention to return at dawn. By first light, the storm had exploded into a gale. 40-foot waves crashed over the bow. Radar lost the buoy. Lookouts could barely see 20 yards through wind-driven spray. The ocean, now a heaving wall of steel-gray chaos, swallowed the marker completely. Official logs later read, Object at marker 7A lost due to deteriorating weather conditions. But the sonar men who heard that metallic echo swore it wasn't random debris. Something was there, motionless, deliberate, out of place. And the second contact, the one moving toward the American coast with an engine signature no one recognized, was still somewhere in the deep Atlantic, slipping west under the cover of the storm. April 22, 1945, North Atlantic, southwest of Newfoundland. Debrief reconstruction, USS Frost, DE-144. The cold front that swept down from Greenland hit Task Force 22.8 like a hammer, turning the Atlantic into a heaving wilderness of slate-colored mountains and valleys. Winds screamed at 40 knots, ripping spray from the crests and slamming it sideways against the destroyer escorts until every railing, every ladder, every exposed bolt was coated in white salt and ice. For 3 days, the task force had battled the weather, radar screens flickering with static, sonar reduced to brief windows of clarity between bursts of wave noise. But no one forgot what they'd left behind, the drifting metallic echo at marker 7A, and the second unidentified contact with an engine pattern that matched nothing in Allied or German records. When the storm finally loosened its grip in the early hours of April 22, visibility returned in patches, pockets of thinning fog that revealed gray horizons and black, restless water. The moment sonar conditions improved, the hunt resumed. At 04:37, aboard USS Frost, DE-144, sonarman Second Class James McCarthy leaned into his headphones and froze. Amid the low-frequency sea hum came a pulse, steady, mechanical, but deeper than expected, the sound of screws turning under heavy pressure. Con, sonar, contact, bearing 210, range medium, depth significant. There was no mistaking the weight in McCarthy's voice. He was hearing something alive, something big, and something trying very hard not to be found. Commander Charles Baldwin, Frost's CO, ordered the ship to general quarters. Red lights washed over the passageways. Boots hammered up ladders. The Frost pushed forward, her bow smashing through the swell as 2 other escorts, USS Stanton and USS Kaufman, moved into a staggered attack formation. The contact held a slow but deliberate course, west-southwest, exactly the direction a westbound U-boat would take if attempting to slip beneath American coastal defenses. But something about the sound bothered McCarthy. The RPMs were irregular, too slow for a German E-motor running deep, too rhythmic for drift noise. It was as if the engine was straining against itself, like a heavy machine running without full lubrication. At 05:22, Frost passed directly over the contact. Sonar confirmed it, a submarine, deep, trying to hide beneath a thermal layer. Baldwin ordered the first attack run. Depth charges tumbled into the water, Mark 8s, set for 600 and 700 feet. The Atlantic erupted with chain thunder, shockwaves rolling back through Frost's hull so violently that the overhead pipes rattled. On the second run, the concussions were stronger. The The sonar display flickered, then cleared, revealing chaos below, rapid depth changes, wild cavitation, a pressure hull twisting under strain. He's panicking, changing depth fast, possibly losing trim. At 09:12, the breaking point came. A massive underwater detonation, either a depth charge or something exploding inside the submarine, rippled through the hulls of the American escorts. Moments later, the ocean surface erupted in a plume of white water and black debris. A conning tower burst through the waves, nose first, rising at an unnatural angle. The submarine, badly wounded, fought gravity for a moment, as if deciding whether to surface or die. Then it leveled out, riding low, water streaming from vents and blast holes. It was U-546, a Type 9 C-40, commanded by Kapitän Leutnant Paul Just, one of the U-boats suspected of making a late-war run toward North America. Frost and Stanton opened fire with 20mm Oerlikons and 40mm Bofors, stitching the water and hull with tracer lines. German sailors scrambled onto the deck, some waving frantically, others attempting to man the anti-aircraft guns before officers dragged them back. The wrecked U-boat began to sink stern first. The bow lifted violently, almost vertical, before sliding under in a rush of foam. Men poured into the water, 23 survivors in total. Frost and Stanton maneuvered to pick them up, throwing cargo nets and rafts into the frigid sea. Corpsmen wrapped shivering prisoners in blankets, handing out cups of hot coffee that steamed in the cold air. The interrogations began within the hour, conducted quietly in the wardroom. Many prisoners were dazed, exhausted, still shaking from exposure. But it was Feldwebel Karl Richter, a radio man, who said the words that shifted the mood of the room. "We shouldn't Amerika erreichen mit Spezialladung." We were meant to reach America with special payload. An intelligence officer pressed him. "What payload?" Richter swallowed. "I do not know. It was sealed before we board it. We believed it was a V-weapon component." Another survivor, a junior machinist, added something stranger. "We were to rendezvous, a buoy marker, but the coordinates were changed without explanation." The room went still. A buoy marker, just like marker 7A. When asked directly whether U-546 had deployed the device, the machinist answered immediately, "No, we carried nothing abnormal. If a device exists, it was not on our boat." The officers exchanged looks heavy with implication. If the U-546 had no special weapon, then another submarine, still unaccounted for, might be carrying it. At 1840, as dusk settled into a blue-gray haze across the Atlantic, Stanton's sonar room reported a faint, distant contact bearing west-southwest. The signature was the same irregular mechanical rhythm they had detected before the storm. Too slow for a Type N, too smooth for drift noise, too consistent to be anything natural. And it was moving steadily toward the American coastline. The debrief record stated only, "Unidentified contact retained intermittent bearing. Classification unknown. Intercept attempt in progress." But among the crew, the unspoken fear grew. The object at marker 7A, whatever it was not debris. And the thing moving toward the United States was not a ghost. It was real. It was mechanical. And it had a purpose. April 28, 1945. North Atlantic, approaches to the Newfoundland-New York shipping lane. Post-action intelligence summary, composite report. The weather cleared just long enough to expose a pale, exhausted horizon. Flat water stretching in all directions, broken only by the wakes of the destroyer escorts as Task Force 22.8 formed a tight inward sweep. The unidentified contact detected after the sinking of U-546 had kept moving west-southwest for nearly 36 hours, slipping in and out of sonar range like a heartbeat fading behind walls. Its engine pattern, if it was an engine, remained maddeningly irregular, a throb just below the threshold of confident classification. By dawn on April 28th, the task force had pushed into a critical region, the shipping lanes feeding into New York Harbor. Every man on board understood the implication. If naval intelligence was correct, if even one Type 9U had been modified to carry a V-weapon system, then whatever was approaching might be on the verge of reaching its launch position. And with Germany collapsing and Hitler rumored dead, desperation could drive the enemy toward unprecedented choices. At 0642, USS Kaufman DE-191 reported a faint, deep contact off her port bow. The bearing matched the last known direction of the unknown target. The escorts converged like a tightening fist. At 0713, sonar aboard USS Stanton picked up the same faint rhythm, slow, pulsing, metallic. McCarthy, the senior sonar man, whispered to his assistant, "That's it, same one from the 22nd." Stanton's captain ordered immediate attack positioning. The ships dropped to 5 knots to reduce self-noise. Sonar pings drifted across the undersea darkness like hollow bells. At 0758, the contact changed depth, descending rapidly, too rapidly, like a submarine performing an emergency dive or a machine sinking under failure. The sudden shift put every officer on edge. German U-boats rarely dove as deep as the trace suggested. Their crush depths were known, their limits predictable. This signal was moving far beyond those limits. At 012 hours, USS Frost crossed directly above the target. The ocean beneath her exploded, not from depth charges, but from something below collapsing inward with massive force. A violent pressure wave struck the hull, rattling dishes in the galley, knocking sailors off balance. Sonar screens flared with white static. Then, silence. An unnatural silence, heavier than the ocean's usual background noise. When Frost regained sonar clarity, there was nothing. No screw noise, no cavitation, no movement. Just a single, faint, metallic echo settling downward, like debris sinking through thousands of feet of black water. For the next 4 hours, the task force combed the grid with active sonar, then with magnetic anomaly sweeps. All they found was a scattering of metallic fragments suspended in the cold depths, too small to identify and too deep to recover. Eventually, the contact disappeared entirely into the abyss. At 1420 hours, the U.S. Navy authorized the secondary phase of Operation Teardrop. In the following days, the remaining U-boats in the region, U-881, U-518, U-549, and U-857, were hunted relentlessly. Several were sunk, including U-881 east of Newfoundland by USS Frost and USS Stanton on May 6th. Others simply vanished without explanation, presumed lost with all hands. But what troubled naval intelligence were the statements from multiple German prisoners, statements later logged under restricted classification. Several survivors from U-546 maintained that a special payload existed, but none could identify which U-boat carried it. One machinist swore he overheard officers discussing a weapons transfer at sea near the Azores. Another claimed a sealed cylinder was loaded aboard a sister submarine before departing Norway, but no conclusive evidence was ever recovered. After the war, U.S. technical teams combed through captured German archives in Flensburg and Kiel. They found references to proposals for submarine-launched V-1 variants, experimental canisters, and long-range bombardment concepts, but no operational records proved such a weapon ever left port. In the end, Operation Teardrop officially recorded the destruction of late-war U-boats attempting to reach American waters. Unofficially, the post-action summaries retained a quieter, unresolved line. The unidentified acoustic contact encountered between April 15th and 28th remains unexplained. No known German design matches the mechanical characteristics observed. Origin undetermined. The coordinates of Marker 7A, where the stationary metallic echo had been detected, were archived. The buoy itself was never recovered. Fishermen passing through the region in the 1950s sometimes reported sonar ghost returns at irregular intervals, but none were verified. The ocean did what it always does. It kept its secrets. And for the men of Task Force 22.8, the memory of that strange signature, steady, metallic, too deliberate to ignore, lingered long after Hitler's Reich surrendered. Some believed it had been a damaged U-boat drifting dead in the water. Some believed it was a weapons canister jettisoned before interception. Others thought it was a prototype container never meant to be found. Decades later, the classified files were reviewed during the early Cold War. Nothing conclusive was added. The unknown contact was simply logged again as unresolved anomaly. No further action. Operation Teardrop ended with victory, but not with certainty. And somewhere beneath 6,000 feet of cold, silent Atlantic water lies an object that was never recovered, never identified, and never explained.